Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you today. Every time I think about this lady, I learn something, even if I don't talk to her. So we're going to have a great time today learning about some unique work for the teams. So I don't want to give it away too much, but if you're into teams, then this is going to be a real solid performance here for you. I'm excited to have Paula Potter with me. How are you today, Paula?
I'm great, Dave. It's really good to connect with you again.
Awesome. Yep, it's been a while. And you're the
Yes.
founder and CEO of the Relational Leader. I love that wording. So tell us, what's the Relational
Thank you.
Leader about?
Oh, well, that's a great question. So, several years ago, Dave, as we all do with our small businesses, I was working on how do I want to brand myself and, what am I about and all of that. And I've actually been in business for a long time. But I remember that working with someone on branding many years ago, she kind of went through a process where we looked at what kind of my strengths were and what I've done. And we just kept coming back to, for me, it was all about leadership and about relations
Okay.
and then that and relationships. And so that's when we kind of landed on the relational leader. And so that's how I branded myself and my company as well.
Awesome. So what do you focus on then, Paula, on a day-to-day basis?
So I focus on a couple of things. I've got really two sides to my business, Dave. So the first side is helping corporations, people within corporate America who have teams, or it could be organizations. It doesn't necessarily have to be a corporate America kind of
Sure.
situation, but helping teams work together more effectively. I focus on team building and leadership. So not only providing training and consulting in those areas, but also working with their internal trainers so that I can help them get up to speed on some of the resources that we have available. You're familiar with DISC and 5 behaviors and a variety of other tools such as that. I've worked with Myers-Briggs over the years. And so really helping them focus on getting their employees working together more effectively. That's the side of my business that's helping employees and teams work together.
Okay.
And then the other side of my business is working with a follow-up tool called Send Out Cards
Okay.
that helps them then really celebrate their team members and individuals, their customers, and provide good follow-up through cards and gifts.
Awesome. Well, I got to say, no team needs help, right? I mean, aren't all teams working perfectly, Paula? Come on.
No, I wish
Yeah,
that was the case,
right. If that was, we'd all be out of work, which would be totally fine, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, so thanks again for hanging out with us. I want to
Sure.
really unpack this, what I call it, and you can correct me on my terminology, but I remember Patrick's book on 5 dysfunctions of a team. And so
Correct.
that's where I think that turned into the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. And
Correct.
so let's kind of walk through that, because I think the first time I was exposed to it, I was like, this is like way too simple. This is way too easy. Patrick was at a global conference that I saw him at, and I just thought, this is way too easy. So then when I found out that you were working in conjunction with them, we got to get this unpacked on this show, because I love what he has to say. And so walk us through the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, great. Yeah, the first time I was exposed, like you, I read the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and oh my gosh, it just really kind of hit home for me. And as you think about teams, so if you can almost visualize a kind of a triangle, a pyramid,
Okay.
and so there are 5 behaviors. So what Wiley, who's the publisher of this assessment, did was they worked with Patrick and took his 5 dysfunctions of a team and turned it into the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. So think back
Gotcha.
to that triangle there, that pyramid, and
Hmm.
so there's 5 behaviors. At the base of the triangle is trust,
Okay.
and that is the most important element for a team. It's also the most important element for any relationship. If you
Right.
think about it, there has to be trust. And so when team members can trust each other, and Patrick breaks it down not in terms of predictability trust, but it's vulnerability based trust. And ooh, that's a word that
Yep.
sometimes sends people into a little bit of a panic there. But it's the idea that I can let you know when I need help. I can admit when I make a mistake. I can say, I don't know everything. So I need some guidance here. So
Sure.
it's being vulnerable and allowing each other to trust each other on a team. So that's the first
Gotcha.
layer, if you will.
Sure.
The
Okay.
second one is conflict. So, and if you're listening now and you're somewhere where you can write this down, feel free to do that. So the second little piece on the triangle moving up from trust is conflict. And what Patrick describes is that you've got to have healthy conflict on a team. So once we trust each other, then if we disagree, if we choose to argue or to kind of mull things over that we're kind of deciding as a team, we can do that because we trust each other. And I know that you have my best interest at heart and vice versa.
Sure.
So conflict is one of those things. A lot of times people think, well, oh gosh, we don't have any conflict in our team. You've got to be able to.
Right.
You know how that is, Dave. I mean, it's either they're kind of hiding it under the rug, they're not
Right.
addressing it, they're trying to gloss it over, or they're just waiting and till they can leave the meeting and then kind of sabotaging each other and
Sure.
things. So you've got to have that healthy conflict.
Well, and I'm just
Uh,
curious about that conflict piece because, like you mentioned, we don't have conflict around here. I hear that a lot, but then I realize as you start talking to individuals on the team that they kind of internalize it, that there is conflict, but it stays within them. I mean, how do you define, when I do my conflict resolution training and I ask people in the room, it's interesting. I say, so let's talk about conflict. Give me some words that describe conflict. And
yes,
out of 20 words, if there's 20 people on that team in that room, I'm going to say 18 or 19 of those words, Paul, are negative, right? There's
always.
very
Yep.
few people that actually come up with a positive, word for conflict. So how do we kind of readjust our thinking on this conflict? Because we need to engage in it, like you said. I agree, but we've kind of been taught to not, stay out of it or not bring it up. So how do you kind of work through that with your groups?
Well, that is where, again, you've got to develop that level of trust first. And I think conflict, a lot of it has to do with, I mean, it's such a loaded word at times. And like you say, Dave, I mean, so many people have a negative
Right. Right.
perception of conflict, but
Yeah.
we've got to be able to move through that. So part of it depends upon how we grew up. Some people grew up in households where they were engaging in discussion about debates and they were arguing with each other, and it was okay because they knew that their relationships were solid. In other family households growing up, people just didn't say anything because they knew if they did, it could turn into a major fight, so they internalized it. I
Hey, were you at one of our you were at one of our family things, Paula? Come on. Don't say that.
There
No.
you go.
I was told to be
Well,
seen and not heard. So so that kind of
yeah,
tells you how
yeah.
that's how I was
Yeah,
raised.
exactly. And I think another thing, Dave, and you know this with your work with different styles, that it comes down to style difference as well.
Right.
Some people are going to be very out there and they're going to speak their mind because they're more extroverted, and they're not concerned about rubbing somebody the wrong way. Others are very much more introverted, and so it's much more difficult for them to bring up issues that are difficult. So,
Right.
sometimes you might want to have a chance for people to jot things down to make sure that you're including input from everybody in the meeting and on the
Sure.
team. It's
Gotcha.
going to be much more difficult for some to come forward with things. So it has to be a safe environment.
And I
So
think
again,
and that's awesome. And we skipped over trust. And so I kind of want to backpedal because, you taught me early on in DISC that different styles trust different things.
yes,
And so I think
yes,
that that's really kind of a thing that I want to make sure that we explain a little bit, because how I look at it is, like a D person for DISC, the driver, that
uh-huh,
results
yep,
oriented person,
hmm,
they trust something different. They trust confidence that you have in them, right?
yes,
And so when
absolutely,
you're confident, they trust, there's that instant trust. And so
uh-huh,
as we go around, the I people, they trust openness.
Yep.
You know,
Hmm.
we all know somebody that is like just tells everything, and they just sometimes maybe tell more than they should, but then they look to you right away
Yes.
to kind of reciprocate back. And when you don't, there's a trust gap right there, right? And
Absolutely.
then the S people, they trust kindness, super kind people, they
Uh-huh.
trust that
Hmm.
kindness. So when you're
Yep.
a D person, you might be kind inside, but if you don't show it, they struggle with that. There's a trust piece there. And then the C
Yes.
people, you know, they trust the expertise. They want you to be an expert. And if you don't understand, you know, the ins and outs of the product you're selling or the ins and outs of your company, they really lack that trust. So, you know, I think
Yeah.
that that's so important. And I love that it's the basis, like you said. Without that trust, we'll never be able to move into any of these other chunks that we're going to talk about. So,
And just one last thing on
yeah,
that, Dave, that I think what happens so many times is that, just as you said, when our styles are different, it's not that maybe I don't really like you and care about you and all of that,
yeah,
but if that trust erodes because, like you said, we are putting our emphasis on different things, it really has to do with our style differences. And so understanding that and being aware of how I can respond differently to someone based on their needs, as you know, makes all the difference in the world.
yeah. And I remember when because I do a lot of work on talking about engaged employees, and there's
Uh-huh.
an easy connection that trust equals engagement. You know, and
Yes.
if you're not engaged at a company, the chances of you know,
Oh.
trusting your leaders is like one in nothing. I mean, the numbers actually, so
Yep.
now I remember them, because I was like, if your people don't trust you as a leader, the chances
Yeah.
of them being engaged are 1 in 12.
Oh,
If they do
wow.
trust you,
Yeah.
then it turns to 1 in 2. So you have like a 6 times more likelihood if
Yeah.
to have engagement, which is what most companies are really trying to go after at the end of the day, is an engaged, you know, employee, team member.
Exactly.
And it all starts at that trust level. That's why I think
Yep.
this work is so critical, because if I
Yes.
don't trust my
Mhm.
leader, I'm not going to go to bat for them. I'm
Nope.
surely I don't have their back. You know, I'm the
Nope.
first one to check out if I don't trust the people.
Mhm.
So that's
And
where I
and
think it's so awesome that you're
and
sharing
think
this.
think about how that affects a company's bottom line.
Sure.
In terms of turnover and when employees aren't engaged, they're going to make mistakes. There's a lot of time spent on communication and miscommunication. And yeah, that's so true, Dave. We're
Yeah.
preaching to the choir here, aren't
Right,
we?
exactly. Well, and you were the one that got me certified in DISC years ago,
Yeah.
and that was what was
Yeah.
so awesome, was I really started to realize, you know, that I was communicating with people, but it wasn't in a communication that they understood. You know,
Or that they
most
could
of us,
hear.
right? Most of us, we you know, communicate in a style, and our
Uh-huh.
expectation is for the person that we're communicating with, they need to acclimate to my way. And I
Yes.
think that's what's really difficult, is that, you know, we have that. And my simple brain, I think to
Uh-huh.
myself, if I would have started this podcast tonight with you in Russian, in a
Oh
completely
gosh.
different language, right? How
Yeah.
long would it have been before you're like, Dave, hey, what did you just say? I don't understand what you said. But that's a
Mhm.
lot of in styles of whether it's a DNI, an SRC, or a Myers-Briggs, or whatever
Yeah.
personality profiling system that you use. When you see different quadrants, that's where I think I look at going, there it is, Russian, someone talking Russian and they don't understand and they're just misfiring. So when
And
you
isn't
see,
it
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Dave.
Yeah,
I
no,
was
go
going to say,
ahead.
isn't it fun when you are working with your teams to see those ahas go on
Yeah,
when all of a sudden they get it like, oh, that person isn't being difficult. It's just that they're communicating in a different way.
right.
And, it's just such an incredible way for people to improve their relationships.
And I think that you hit on something which I want to kind of put you on the spot, because you use the words bottom line. And
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of D driven entrepreneurs that listen to this, sales professionals, you know, people
Hmm.
that are very results oriented. That
Yep.
bottom line is very important.
Mhm.
So how do you take a personality profile like you were talking about, or even you know, um, the 5 behaviors? How do you take that and turn that into something that a bottom line person could understand?
Well, it's really, and again, there are many ways you can evaluate training and all of that. I mean,
Right.
it's not that a 2 hour or a 4 hour training session is going to get you to where you need to be. But I think from a bottom line perspective, there are things that you can look at within your company, such as, what is our turnover rate with employees?
Yeah.
What is our rate? One of the things I'll give you an example of this. I remember talking with a D style long time ago. One particular person I was coaching, and he was all about bottom line, and this is all this fluffy
It wasn't
stuff.
me,
And
was it?
no, but it could have been.
Could have been. Okay. I'll let you know if I remember the story. So sorry,
But
but
one
I
of the things that
digress.
I know, no problem, that's great, is it's as I was talking with him and we were looking at some things, I said, well, it's all a matter of if you want things to be effective. If you want to be effective, you've got to learn how to do this.
Yeah.
If I'm a strong D and all I have to do, and I'm kind of maybe simplifying this a little bit, but if I'm working with someone who has a strong steadiness, an S style, if I slow down a couple of minutes when I come in, let's say on Monday morning, this is back when we were going into the workplace,
Sure. Yeah.
maybe when we're on a Zoom call, if I just will take a couple of minutes and ask that person, how was their weekend? How is their spouse? How are their kids? That person is going to go to bed and work much harder
Sure.
for me because they know that I value the relationship. Now, you have
Yeah.
to be sincere about it,
Right.
but it's not like that D style has to change everything they're doing. They just have to flex a little bit to meet the needs of that other style. And
Gotcha.
the results speak for themselves in a bottom line because you'll see that in the commitment level that that employee has. What you talked about with the engagement there, Dave.
Sure. That's awesome. So now you started with the vulnerability word, which like some people are like, oh my gosh, you're on shaky ground. Now you just throw sincere in there. It's like, come on. I mean, I'm a business owner, right? I don't have time for that, Paula. I just gotta keep going straight, right? So if you're listening, just take a breath and realize that, you know what, these are things that certain people really place high levels of
Yes.
importance on. Just
Mhm.
because you don't doesn't mean that other people don't. And I think that's where we get stuck is whatever I trust, whatever I deem to be important, obviously the rest of the world better deem that to be important as well. And I think that's
Yeah.
where the conflict comes in.
Mhm.
And hopefully we have at least a high enough emotional intelligence level that we're able to be challenged by somebody else and allow them to challenge us and learn something from it as well. So that's
So
that's
true.
that's what I'm hoping happens. So we talked about trust, we talked about conflict. What's the next chunk on the pyramid then for the 5 behaviors?
So the next step is commitment.
Okay.
And what that refers to is that, as an example, let's say we have a team meeting, we're kicking around how we're going to deal with a particular project or a client or whatever it might be. So, the idea between commitment is that at the end of that discussion, at the end of that process, everybody on the team commits that yes, this is the decision we're making, even though it may not be my best solution. Maybe I think my idea is still the better one.
Sure.
But because we trust each other, because you've allowed me to voice my concerns through the conflict and the discussion and all of that, I will agree to commit to us moving forward with this action item or this plan of direction because I know we trust each other. I know I've had a chance to say what I need to say about it. As a team, we've come up with a decision we want to go forward with, and each individual on that team is committed to that decision to move forward.
Wow. Okay, so and I'm assuming because it gets smaller as you get
Uh-huh.
up, it gets more difficult because I mean, and maybe that's just me, but I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, now if I have to jump in on a team and buy in, because that's what you're asking me to do, right? I
Hmm.
gave you my
Yes.
opinion, Paula,
Uh-huh.
and
Yep.
you, for whatever reason, thought that another opinion was, better, whatever, right?
Uh-huh.
What
Mhm.
I have to really do is resist that temptation right at that spot to really like set you up to fail, because it'd be really
Exactly.
easy to be like, ha, told ya, and then wipe my hands of that and go, see, you guys, if you would have listened to me, wouldn't have this issue. How
Well,
in the world do you unpack that for somebody that's prone to that kind of behavior?
yeah, and again, and here's one of the things that Patrick has found in his work, I've found in my work with working with this model as well, is that you said each one gets a little bit more difficult. Yeah, and you kind of think that the challenge is that, and every team is going to move differently, Dave.
Hmm.
I found some teams that can move a little bit quicker than others. Some teams we spend, I mean, an incredible amount of time at the trust level,
Sure.
because until you get that trust, that foundational piece, you
Yep.
can't move forward. So they
Yep.
all build
Absolutely.
on each other.
Yep.
And so, and that's where the challenge is. If we've got people that aren't committing to moving forward and they're still sabotaging, we have
Yep.
to come back to trust. We have
Yep.
to come back to conflict because there's things going on there. And sometimes you may not have the right person on the bus. I mean,
Sure.
there are times when the best thing you can do is say, you know what, I think we're at a point here where maybe it's best for you to look for, I mean, there's ways that you want to do that,
Sure.
obviously,
Yep.
but not everyone is going to be on the same page and needs to be on the bus with you,
That's interesting.
quite frankly.
Yeah, and actually, I did take a group through. It was funny because I read the book and I loved it. I'm like, and I was working with a team that was struggling with trust. So
Uh-huh.
we got the book out and just literally started going through it. And it was interesting because we had to stop for
Yep.
years. I mean, years
Mm-hmm.
we had to stop because they
Mm-hmm.
couldn't get past, they couldn't trust each other. It was a
Yep.
leadership team.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't trust
Yep.
each other. So we had to stop for years before we were able to resume that. And so
Yeah.
that's what that's, let's say it takes a ton of work, right? This isn't
It
just
it
checking little
does.
things off of a
No.
list. And that's what I tell people about your disc assessment. If you take a disc assessment and you get 20, 30, 40, 50 pages, however long it is, please don't put it in a 3-ring binder, put it up on the shelf and go, whew, check
Yep.
that bad boy
Done
off
that.
my list, right? I mean, and
Yep.
I don't need to see it anymore because I did it. And that's where I'm like, you're better off not even doing this because you're just going to frustrate yourself in thinking that this is going to do something. So,
Well, I want to address that, Dave,
yeah.
because what you just hit on was so important in this five behaviors work. One of the very first things that I do when I'm working with a team on this is I have a lengthy conversation with the top person, with the leader of the team.
Okay.
And I'll tell you that if the leader is not on board with really taking a look at where the team is at and getting feedback for themselves,
Sure.
if you've got a leader that is a little bit thin-skinned, this is probably not the right process for them. You need a leader that's willing to say, you know what, we have some work to do, and
Yeah.
I am on board with this, and I want to be the leader and move forward with us as a team,
Right. Wow.
because they have to be a champion for this. If they're not,
Yeah.
it's like you, and I've had that happen too, where you have to just stop and say, you know what, we need to take a break from this
Yeah.
because there were too many other issues. This is hard, hard work.
Right. And I have to say, from a leadership perspective, I mean, I've owned companies. The biggest one I had was we had about 22 people on our team and we had about 10
Mhm.
million in annual sales. And in
Good for
that,
you.
if I wasn't willing to take the flag and lead
Yes.
that, I mean, it wasn't like me leading and them following. It was really
Yeah.
me leading and them
Uh-huh.
following in a sense of vulnerability and sincerity. And if
Yes.
I wasn't willing to take the brunt of the responsibility, I mean, I know
Yeah.
early in my leadership career, I was looking for everybody to blame. It was
Oh, yeah.
everybody else's fault but mine, right?
We've all done that,
And
I mean,
yep.
yeah. That's how you grow and you mature and you become a better leader when you realize that I've got to take a look at my behavior here and how that's affecting the team.
Right.
And I can tell you story after story about, where things have gone very badly and also where they've been able to, make some progress through. But
Right.
one of the things on the trust piece, and without going into a lot of information, is I will counsel that leader before we get started and say, okay, here are a couple of exercises we're going to be doing as it relates to trust. I am requesting that you go first.
Sure.
And so you show how this works and, how you can be vulnerable. Oh my gosh. And I tell you what, I have never done this whole process. And for those of you out here thinking, oh, here we go, this is the
Yeah.
touchy feely. This is
Yeah.
hard work. I
Sure.
have never gotten through that trust exercise without there being tears, without there being a lot of ahas,
Yep.
without there being incredible breakthroughs
Right.
for a team. But it's
Right.
hard.
Well, and we keep thinking that it's like the old fashioned what's that called, where fall back, Paul, and I'll catch you, right? That's how we
Oh
figure
yeah,
trust, right?
it's
And
nah.
then and I always laugh because I think of Lucy and Charlie Brown, and I mean,
Yep,
Charlie
yep.
Brown never kicked the football, right? She kept moving
No.
the thing constantly. And there was, but yet he kept going back, so it kind of was on him, but kind of was on her, right? So
Yep.
I mean, and as you're talking about the third one, the commitment to a decision, again, once we have to get to that point where we really trust that individual, and we're
Yes.
able to explain conflict, we're able to go through anything that we're struggling with.
Yep.
And then once we get to that commitment, what's the next step then in that process?
So the fourth behavior is accountability.
Okay.
And this is the one that is often one of the most difficult for teams to do. Because what that means is that's not me being accountable. That is, Dave, me holding you accountable. When we've agreed to a decision, we trust each other, we've dealt with conflict, we can be open with each other. That's me coming to you and saying, hey, Dave, I think I thought we agreed that you were going to do this, and I'm not seeing that happen. Help
Sure.
me understand what you need from me or what support you need in order for you to get done what you committed to doing.
Wow.
Ooh, those are
Yeah.
tough
There you
conversations.
go. So you just crossed the line right there. Okay. You had me. You were all good, Paula. We were going on the right track. And now all of a sudden you're going to hold me accountable.
I'm going to hold you accountable, and you're
Oh
going to
my
hold me
gosh.
accountable
Right.
because that's what we do as a healthy team.
Right.
Yep.
And this is where I think the EQ part, the emotional quotation, this is where this
Yes.
comes in so much, because your
Yep.
self-awareness, if you're not self-aware, and
Yep.
because I know I'm learning as I go to
Uh-huh.
improve my self-awareness,
We all are.
right? But there are
Mhm.
people that really are stuck and they don't understand it. So if you come to me and say, Dave, are you doing this? My
Uh-huh.
immediate reaction is, well, are you doing yours? Forget me, right? I want to deflect this off to somebody,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yep.
So how do you work with people that do that? And the cool part is my next book I'm working on is called What Blind Spots, and we're going
Oh,
to work
good.
through business blind spots, because there are some, and there's a difference between somebody that really has a blind spot that doesn't know it, and there's a difference between that and somebody that's just totally like rebellious and totally, you're not telling me what to do, very, very staunch in what they believe in.
Yeah.
So when you're talking with somebody and that accountability piece comes in, are you
Yeah.
seeing people trying to deflect at first, or by the time they're already this deep in, have they started to kind of soften up? I guess I'll use those words.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Dave. And again, it just depends on the progress that the team is making. There are things we do along the way to help them develop some whatever you want to call them ground rules for how the
Sure.
team's
Yep.
going to operate, how they're going to handle conflict, how they're going to handle accountability,
Sure.
and giving them those skills so that they can have those conversations, those one-on-ones with each other. There's coaching involved often. I don't know if you remember when we went through, I'm pretty sure I used this when we did the DISC certification, but the old Johari window that looks at feedback and disclosure. So if I'm in a team member, there's two ways that I'm going to grow. This is a piece of the self-awareness,
Sure.
on the emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
So one is that I have to be willing to disclose things about myself. Here are some things I know that I need in order to be successful. Here are some things I don't like. Here are some things that, will help set me up for success. So
Sure.
I share with you what I disclose about myself. And then the other piece of that is I have to be open to receiving feedback from you about how I'm doing.
Gotcha.
And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's tough. And
Right.
it's being sensitive and caring, but also tough with each other so that we can all move forward as a team.
Well, and just for those of you that think, in case you think I've arrived, when my wife tells me something, my natural tendency is to immediately rebut that and say, you do it worse. You think I'm bad at this. Oh my gosh, you're way worse at this, right? So I
Uh-huh.
just, like I said, I'm still working on it. For anyone that's ever been through some kind of anonymous, right? The first
Uh-huh.
step is
Yep.
always to understand, hey, I got an issue here. There's a problem. There's
Exactly.
something
Yep.
here. And as a
Yep.
business coach and as a sales coach, that's what I invest the majority of my time on, is trying to
Yeah.
help people through those areas. And so
Yes.
that's what I appreciate about it. It's hard to think about somebody holding me accountable, though, because let's face it,
Yeah.
one of the big reasons that I became a business owner and an entrepreneur, that I want to do things my own way, is because I don't have that accountability, right? But yet that's the
Oh,
problem of a lot of
yeah.
business owners that don't have accountability. So how do you
Yes.
work through that piece when you encounter a kind of a resistant leader in this spot right here?
I think what you just mentioned, Dave, in terms of, I think we all need coaches. We all need someone we can be accountable to. And whether that's you or it's our spouse or it's,
Right,
a fellow team member, it's when we can admit honestly that, hey, yeah, I dropped the ball on that.
right,
And that you're not going to judge me on that. You're going to just say, hey, we all do that.
right,
Let's figure out how we can get you back on track with this.
right.
And then I have to be open to when you say, hey, Paula,
Yeah,
and hopefully it's not, well, you did this and
right.
if
Yep.
you only knew what you do. Yeah,
Yep.
because it's easy. It's so human to get back into that kind of a blaming mode.
Right.
And again, that's why trust is the foundation. We have healthy conflict. We commit to our goals and to our process forward, and then we hold each other accountable.
And I think that's where, if we don't hold the accountability the right way, we kind of go back to the unhealthy
Yeah.
conflict,
And
right?
that's where you have to maybe go back and reestablish some guidelines and
Yep.
talk through what happened
Yep.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to approach somebody, Paul, and say, why don't you trust me? It's
Yeah.
hard to have those one-on-one conversations. And I think that, I don't know how you do it, but my preference is, when we're dealing with some of these delicate things, that it becomes more of a one-on-one.
Oh,
Trying to say, all
absolutely.
right, let's everyone start with telling the group what your deepest, darkest secret is.
Yeah.
That nothing shuts a building down quicker, right? Things like that. So,
Oh gosh.
I'm just
Yep.
trying to, find ways to communicate with people so that they can move forward. And if they see it and it's not a blind spot and they're still resistant, that kind of becomes on them. And, I
Yes.
want to try and help
Yes.
them.
Yep.
But I love what you said about the coaching thing, because people ask me, or some people come up to me when they find out what I do. And I don't know why they feel like they have this need, but they're like, I don't need a coach. And they're like, or they say, what does a coach do for me?
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
my response as of late's been, you know what, here's the deal. I don't know what coaches do. And I
Uh-huh.
don't know if you need a
Hmm.
coach, but I can tell you this, that in my book, Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods are two of the absolute best athletes in the world. For some odd
Yep.
reason, they needed a coach. I don't know
That's right.
why. You call and ask them,
Yep.
but there was something, again, somebody standing outside of Tiger Woods' body could see
Yep.
a glitch in his swing that the
Uh-huh.
average person would never be able to see, and Tiger couldn't see it. So
Exactly.
that's kind of how I look at it. And if they're still resistant, then the realization is, you know what, there are certain people that either are always going to be resistant to that, and there's nothing
Hmm.
I can really do for that person at that.
That's so true. You've got to work with the willing, that's for sure.
Work with the willing. There you go. I love it. That's awesome. So as we think about then, as we get to the top chunk after the accountability, what's the last piece of that triangle?
So the last piece is results.
Okay.
So if you've done all of these other pieces right, then you are going to get the results you want for a team, and that's where you can do some kind of evaluation and say, did we get the results we wanted? If we didn't, what might have caused that to happen? And I'm sure familiar, Dave, with the old SWOT analysis
Yep.
and some of those tools where
Yeah.
you can use to say, well, what was going on? What changed in our environment? There are a lot of companies, individuals right now that this has been a tough year with COVID.
Sure.
And so they may not be getting quite the results they had intended. They need to regroup. They need to pivot and figure out kind of what those new goals are and where they need to kind of redirect. And by the way, I want to
Yeah.
mention before I forget,
For
talking
sure.
about COVID,
Yeah.
that I did develop a handout that has, I think I called it 20, what did I call it? 20 tips to help your team teaming through COVID.
Okay.
So what I did was I just had a little bit of fun with the word, and COVID is, connection and communication. The O is opportunity and originality. V is vulnerability and visibility. I is inclusivity and innovation. And D is disruption and discomfort. And
Wow.
so I have 20 tips here on
Okay.
how to help your team.
Awesome.
And if anybody wants a copy of this, feel free. Is it okay for me to give my
Yeah, for
email
sure, man.
out? Okay,
Absolutely.
all right,
Yep.
okay, all right. So just email me, paula@paulapotter.com, or you can connect with me on social media, and I will email that set of tips there, the 20 tips for you
Awesome.
um, right away. So
Perfect.
thanks on that, Dave.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's awesome. And I think that, when you think about results, that's what a lot of companies look at, right? Quarterly earnings
Yes.
reports, daily stock,
Mhm. Mhm.
what their rates are. They look at a
Yep.
lot of this, and it's hard to, think of it in a team fashion,
Uh-huh.
because as we start to look at that, in the triangle at the top is this little chunk,
Yeah.
and a lot of people probably never really get there in a healthy way, and
Uh-huh.
that's why,
Yes.
like, I wrote my
Yes.
book Growing on Purpose, was
Yes.
because so many people that I ran into and still do that are growing by mistake, you know
Yes.
and I'm thinking, and you correct me if I'm wrong, if we were doing a math uh, test, and it was trust plus conflict plus commitment plus accountability equals result.
Equals.
That's
Equals.
kind of
Yes.
automatic, right? If you do these
Yes.
things, it's an if then type thing,
Yep.
which is
That's
awesome.
so right. And I think what you said too, Dave, that, it's really tough in today's environment where people are focused on this quarter's results and all of that.
Yeah,
And if we're not building in a healthy way with our teams as a leader, we might be able to pull off a little bit of short-term results that work for what we need, maybe even for, a little bit longer than a quarter, that kind of stuff. But
yeah,
what will happen over time is if we're not building the correct way, that things start to break apart, and that's where you have all kinds of issues going on.
right.
So the
Yeah,
damage gets
absolutely.
done.
Yeah, and oddly enough, you take just a quick look at a parable, and think about the guy that built his house on a rock versus the guy that
Yes.
built his house on sand. And I utilize that thinking with trust. If you're going to build on something other than
Yeah.
this real firm trust,
Yes.
eventually this other stuff is just going to collapse.
You got it.
And
That's
that's
I
what I'm
love that
seeing a
parable.
lot of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing
Yeah.
that a lot in business. There is, with so many get rich quick schemes. I mean, I don't know about you, but
Mhm.
I'm getting inundated by people on
Oh, yes.
and they're telling me as a coach that there's 3 easy steps to 25 customers this time tomorrow. And I'm just thinking to myself, I mean, I get it. I love that you have the tenacity, go for it. It's just that I've never seen a get rich quick type thing, nor have I
Yes.
seen you try and skip any one of these steps because you're ending
Yeah.
up having to go backwards. At least the experience
Hmm.
and the research that I've done, you're always going to go backwards and fix that
Yeah.
anyway. So why do it wrong the first time? So my question was to
Exactly.
you is, do you have people that tend to just try and tell me, Paula, I just want to get right to the results. Just let's skip to step 5. We don't need 1, 2, 3, and 4. I just want to achieve collective goals. Do you get that out of people at times?
Oh, yeah, I will, especially when I have those initial conversations. What will often happen is somebody will say within an organization, hey, I'd really like you to bring in 5 behaviors for this team that really needs it.
Sure.
And then when I talk with the head person on that team, and if they say something along that line, I don't want to mess with all this, I just want the results, then I'll just ask them, so how's that working for you?
Sure.
Because usually it's not. And this is not something that I've found anyway that in the long haul that you can shortcut.
Yeah.
It's unfortunately, you have to
Yep.
go through the slog in order to get to where you want to be.
And that's what's so interesting that when people are trying to do those skipping steps, like
Uh-huh.
that people, I haven't seen it work, and maybe it does, but
No.
it's usually if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true, right? I mean,
It's no different
unless
than
Ed
anything
McMahon
else.
hangs out at your door, knocks on your door, publisher's
Woohoo!
house clearing, whatever that's called, right?
Yep.
$5,000 a week for
Yep.
life or whatever they are at now. I mean, that's probably,
It's it's
where
the
where you're
it's the
gonna end up.
same thing with, losing weight or anything, or, saving money or anything else.
Right.
We want that quick fix. And yet it's discipline, it's consistency, it's some basic principles, as you talk about Tiger Woods and
Yep.
Michael Jordan, it's the basic fundamentals that you've got to do. And I have to say, I'm hearing myself say this. I love to golf. I'm not doing the basic fundamentals. And that's why I'll
Oops.
never be a great
Right.
golfer,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
but you got to do the fundamentals. And this is a part
Absolutely.
of the fundamentals. Yeah.
Yeah, I had somebody on the show that actually Eric Plattenberg, which he went up to the top of Mount Everest,
Oh my.
and it took
Oh,
and I was shocked at
oh,
how many days it was. A 63-day adventure, and he
wow.
would have to go up the mountain and then back down, sometimes 3 and 4 times to make
Yeah. To
sure it's
get to,
right
yeah. Hmm.
and acclimate. And I'm thinking to myself, High D Dave is like 20 minutes tops, right? And he's got 63 days invested in them. So,
Oh
it's
my
such a
gosh.
learning experience for me to realize that, you can't necessarily just go from, the first day I opened my store in whatever in 91, it was $0.
Yeah.
And then when we sold
Yes.
in 2013, it was 10 million. It didn't
Uh-huh.
go from 0 to 10 million in a day. It took 20 years. So,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what's crazy about that. So, is there
Yes.
anything else that you want to share on this 5 behaviors piece that we might have missed, or do you think you covered it as much as we need to?
I think, I mean, I would just encourage people, get the book, read The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's a great, easy read. It'll give you a sense of how a team is struggling and what they do to kind of overcome some of that.
Awesome.
I would just say to, learn as much as you can. What you mentioned, Dave, about emotional intelligence, DISC, learning some of those kinds of tools is a great way to kind of dip your toe in the water.
Sure. Okay.
We and just I think the more you can do to celebrate what a team is doing, you're going to struggle,
Yeah.
especially now in this virtual environment. But anything that you can do to really build trust and to take baby steps with your team to
Sure.
move them into a healthy, functioning team. And you and I have been on teams, I know I have anyway,
Mhm.
maybe I should speak for myself, that are very dysfunctional, and I've been on teams that are very healthy. And the experience,
Yeah.
from a personal perspective, it's such a joy to work on a team that's really syncing along and,
Right.
all working on all four cylinders. And we spend so much of our lives on teams in the workplace, whether, we're on a team for a social, or whether we're on a team volunteer,
Yeah.
maybe soccer teams your kids are on, or whatever it might be.
Right.
And and we've always been taught, well, just play nice and get along.
Right.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I would just encourage people to make a commitment to learning about yourself, learning about others on your team, and really be willing to accept feedback from others and to share what you need in a healthy way with small steps toward building trust.
There you go again, accepting feedback now. Come on, I'll give feedback all day long. Everyone listening loves to give feedback, okay? I guarantee it. I had a guy after my book was released and went to Amazon #1 bestseller in 3 categories, and like, thank
Congratulations.
you.
That's awesome, Dave. Yeah.
About 3 weeks into it, I got an email from a guy with like a couple of things that were wrong with, punctuation or whatever. It's like, oh my gosh, I guess, I didn't realize I should have sent it to you first. I apologize, so.
Yes. Oh
As,
gosh.
as we come in for a landing, I got 2 questions for you, and then I'm going to let you
Okay.
go. So
All right.
I want to know Paula Switzer Potter's tip of the week. What would you tell somebody listening is the best tip you got? And it can be about whatever it needs to be.
I guess, especially with kind of the world the way it is right now, I would say be kind, because you never know what somebody else is going through. We think we might,
Right.
but there's a lot that's under the surface, and we're all doing the best we can.
Yep.
And so try and be kind to people and know that if we give them a little grace, we can also give ourselves a little grace.
That's awesome. I'll never forget the story somebody told me about a guy in the subway, and he was with his 2 kids, and he was just
Oh,
sitting there.
I've heard this story.
Right? And
Go
the 2
ahead.
kids were just kind of like ruckusing around and
Yes.
just getting into other people's stuff and just
Yep.
totally disheveled, right?
Hmm.
And somebody finally came up to the guy and said, "Hey, could you kind of calm these kids down? This is a real nuisance, you know?"
Yeah.
And the guy said, "Hey, I'm really sorry. We just left the hospital and we just lost our mom/wife. And,
Yeah.
I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do." And could you imagine being that person that
Oh,
said something about those kids and then you now have to live with that? So I love your be kind piece, and you don't know what other
yeah.
people are going through.
Yeah.
And if
Uh,
you want extra
yeah.
credit, be kind. If you want double extra credit, ask them, because they may need
Yes.
somebody to come alongside them and really
Yeah.
help them through a tough time. And that's how I love coaching, because I do get to come alongside people that are
Yeah.
struggling with some of their things professionally primarily, but sometimes
Personally.
it
Hmm.
spills over into business. So,
Yep. Always does.
all right, last question. This one you have no clue what's coming, so this is a cool one for you. What's one thing most people don't know about you that you feel comfortable sharing?
That's a good question. Uh, well, I don't know if I even ever shared this with you. This is kind of
Uh-oh.
an interesting.
Yes, now I got me going here. Good.
Oh gosh, if you've ever played that Three Truths and a False,
Okay,
I
sure.
don't know if you ever
Yep.
played that. This is
Yep.
one of those that I've done. So many years ago, when I was in my early 20s, so that's a long time
Oh
ago.
my gosh, that's like
I
9 years
actually,
ago. Give me a break.
ah, bless you, bless you.
Yeah.
I actually took a year between my junior and senior year of college and traveled with a singing and dance group called Up With People.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, so we traveled all over the world.
Okay.
And one of the things we had so many great experiences, but one of the most awesome experiences we had, Dave, and this is so amazing. We spent 3 weeks on the islands of Hawaii, and that was back in the day when we were sponsored by Aloha Airlines. That they would actually even have us stand up in the aisles, and we would sing, "Mauna Loa, cowboy,
Oh my
is the
gosh.
place." and all this. Well, when
Sure.
we went to all the islands, the Hawaiian islands, including the island of Molokai, and which was where the leper colony was. We had a chance to hike down all the switchbacks down the mountain
Oh my
and
gosh.
perform for the leper colony that day.
Oh,
And that
wow.
was an incredible kind of an out of body
Oh,
experience
no
almost.
kidding.
And
Wow.
we were young kids, we were scared, my gosh, how are we going to contract leprosy, all
Yeah,
that.
no
We had a
kidding.
doctor come and
Yeah,
reassure us that,
yeah.
you have to be around it forever, for a long time.
Wear
These
masks and
these
be 6 feet apart, right?
there you go. Good tie-in.
Yeah.
But these individuals that were on this leper colony had given up their kids
Mm,
because they did not want their kids to
sure,
contract leprosy.
sure.
And so,
Wow,
it was just an incredible experience. So, yeah,
wow.
I don't think you knew that about me,
No,
did
I
you?
didn't. Oh my gosh. And when you said up with people, I immediately thought of the Coca-Cola commercial,
Oh,
back in
yeah.
the
Oh,
70s. And,
absolutely. Yep.
so that's well, Paula, this has been awesome. I so appreciate it. If
Thank
somebody
you.
wants to get in contact with you, learn more about you, learn more about send out cards, learn
Uh-huh.
more about the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Thank you. So the best way is just go to paulapotter.com,
Okay.
PAULAPOTTER.com. I've got everything there, and they can, connect with me via there or social media, and I'm happy to share anything I can.
Awesome. Cool. And one last reminder for anyone listening that wants the teaming through COVID, just email Paula and she will send that out. What's that email again, one more time?
It's paula@paulapotter.com. Make it
Awesome.
pretty easy.
Yeah, no kidding. Thanks. Hey, if I can remember it, anyone can. So we're good. Well, thank you again so much for unpacking this 5, dysfunctions of a team is how I still remember it. So,
Sure.
I appreciate that. I took a ton of notes, so I'm going to probably steal some of your stuff if that's okay.
That's
And,
great.
and let's, hopefully, and are you still in Kansas City, by the way?
No, we moved about a year ago, Dave. We are in Sedona, Arizona.
Oh, come
So,
on. You left the
yeah,
Midwest snow.
I know.
Oh,
Yeah.
come on. What
We
was the
wanted to
temperature
be,
today in Sedona?
well, believe it or not, today in Sedona is very cold. We're having a really cold day.
Uh-oh.
It's 44, which is
Oh,
unusual here. But most of the days, it'll be
yes.
back up in the 70s. I'm playing golf on Thursday. It'll be
There you go.
75 when I play on Thursday. So,
Wow. We might be shoveling on Thursday, so I'll think of it. That's awesome, Phil.
okay.
Thank you again so much, and I
All right.
appreciate everything, and I'm sure we'll
Thank you.
catch up again soon.
And thank you for the work you're doing, Dave. I think it's awesome, the areas you're focusing on, and I hope that people know how valuable an asset you are. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Enjoy. We'll be in touch.
Okay. All right. Bye
Bye.
bye.